Hello and welcome to Behind the Music, where we take an inside look at the music you'll hear on North Carolina Symphony programs. I'm Michelle Di Russo, Assistant Conductor of the North Carolina Symphony. This weekend, the Symphony will perform cornerstone works by Tchaikovsky and Sibelius, plus a piece by North Carolinian composer Caroline Shaw, conducted by Douglas Boyd. The opening piece of this program is Caroline Shaw's Entr'acte, written in 2011. She's the youngest composer ever to have been awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Music, and since then, her career has taken flight, getting her commissions with Seattle Symphony, Baltimore Symphony, LA Philharmonic, the Orchestra of St. Luke's, the Dover Quartet, and many others. This piece was written while she was finishing her doctoral degree in composition at Princeton and has been widely performed since the pandemic started due to its instrumentation. It is written for a string orchestra, as her inspiration was drawn from hearing the Brentano Quartet play Haydn's Quartet, Opus 77, No. 2. Not only this, but Caroline Shaw was trained primarily as a violinist from an early age in North Carolina, so you will be able to appreciate her exquisite writing for strings. Entr'acte is structured like a minuet and trio, as the movement that struck her the most from Haydn's Quartet was indeed the minuet. She mentions how she loves it when, in her own words, some music takes you to the other side of Alice's looking glass in a kind of absurd, subtle technicolor transition. What I have found the most interesting when looking at the score is that although the piece has a simple structure and the ear has an easy time understanding the blend of traditional harmony, dissonances, and impressive string effects, the music language is actually very complex. Caroline Shaw uses different meters, hemiolas, and syncopations that are consistently changing the center of gravity of the tempo, which you wouldn't notice unless you looked at the score. Also, she has very specific indications for the string players on how to achieve the percussive sounds you will be hearing soon. For example, the first indication for these sounds is light finger pressure to produce pitchless bow noise. Staff placement of X note head was arbitrary. This means that players will place their fingers on a string and use the bow to play the noted rhythm without producing any specific pitch. The trio section will really explore the different sounds that string instruments can produce and challenge the musicians as they need to use varied techniques to play this piece. She will include Bartok pizzicato, a very strong and aggressive metallic sound, pitch glissandi, and harmonics. After going back to the main theme of the minuet, the piece ends as the instruments stop playing and dissolve into the background. A cello solo will play rolled chords of pizzicati, recalling fragments of an old tune or story. It is truly incredible how the composer manages to blend Baroque and classical music with our current century. The next piece we will play in this first half of the program is a beloved and well-known piece to music lovers, Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major with soloist Chi Yun. Although Tchaikovsky's concerto eventually became a success and one of the most performed compositions, it was initially not well received, and it came during a time of deep personal crisis. Written in 1978, Tchaikovsky embarked on this project after hearing Lalo's Symphony Español. He admired that Lalo thought more about musical beauty than observing and abiding by established traditions. It is known that Tchaikovsky was not a huge fan of Brahms and Wagner's music and preferred composers such as Delibes and Bizet. In this spirit, he set out to write an attractive concerto that would please the listeners, and yet the work did not please anyone at the beginning. It was thanks to the public enthusiasm that the piece emerged triumphant in the standard repertoire after being criticized by violinists and critics alike. The piece is set into 3 standard movements with an opening allegro moderato that starts quietly with a noble tune in the first violins and a brief introduction that anticipates the main theme that, after a small crescendo, gives way to the soloist presenting the main theme with a simple accompaniment. The pace increases a little with virtuosic movements and approaches the second equally lyrical theme. Although the themes do not contrast, There is variety presented in the interludes and development, including a majestic one with a Polonaise rhythm and a brilliant coda with virtuoso fireworks. The second movement, canzonetta, is what the name indicates, a small song. Tchaikovsky had doubts about this movement and wrote a replacement in a day after his patroness, Nadezhda von Meck, criticized it severely. This middle movement presents a plaintive mood, and its structure and texture are simple as woodwind chords prepare the soloist's setting. There will be two elegant themes quietly introduced with accompaniment from the violins, viola, and French horns that lead directly into the final movement without any pause. This movement really shows how Tchaikovsky incorporates Russian elements to his musical language, such as a drone accompaniment, the initial theme on the G string that gives the music a deep, resonant sound, a tempo that gets faster and faster, a lyrical folk melody, and repetitive musical themes. In contrast with the previous movement, the third movement bursts with a fiery orchestral introduction that leads to an unaccompanied entrance from the soloist in a cadenza-like passage and anticipates a dazzling rondeau theme that keeps returning and gives further opportunities for virtuoso display. With tricky scales, double stops, dangerous leaps, and a challenging tempo and accuracy, many of the technical difficulties of the concerto can be found here, but the effect is absolutely stunning. There is no doubt that the concerto is now a standard piece in the romantic violin concerto repertoire, and as Leopold Auer said, the violinist that was intended to play the first performance and cancelled, the concerto has made its way in the world. And after all, that is the most important thing. It is impossible to please everybody. Closing our program, we will perform a contemporary classic that departed from the conventions of its genre, Sibelius Symphony No. 2. Reaching the beginning of the 20th century, Finland was going through some turmoil as they were fired with excitement over their own culture, collecting traditional music and dance, delving into Finnish legends, and returning to use the Finnish language, a clear move against Russian occupation. Sibelius was one of the musicians that produced a series of works during this nationalistic period, the piece Finlandia being the one reaching beyond Finnish borders. But not all of his works were written in Finland. Some of his compositions were carried out in Italy. Sibelius traveled to Italy in 1901, where he began composing his second symphony and finished it once back in Finland. It is important to point out that Sibelius' original music is a product of musical genius, and it is what makes his music profound, specific, and evocative, yet timeless and universal, regardless of his nationalistic tendencies. The symphony was the most important genre for Sibelius to develop his musical thoughts at a time when his colleagues like Strauss, Schoenberg, Stravinsky, and Bartók were pioneering work done somewhere else than this form. Mahler, a contemporary of Sibelius, took the symphony to mean and be something quite different, while Sibelius tried to continue developing the form in the same direction as Beethoven's symphony. Sibelius composed his second symphony between 1901 and 1902 in 4 movements with a duration of 45 minutes, making it his longest symphony. The symphony has been associated by some with Finland's struggle for independence, and others claim that it had not intended any patriotic message, including Sibelius, declaring that he preferred no programmatic implications to be attached to his work. In this symphony, we get to really see Sibelius' musical structure and architecture, where instead of beginning with melodic statements, he works from the thematic nuclei, which evolve into complete structures. This concept of parts and patterns is illustrated at the beginning of the symphony, with the strings' gentle riffs of repeated notes seeming to be mere accompaniment waiting for a theme to start above, and that's what happens. But as the movement progresses, we understand that those figures are actually fragments that will be part of a larger formation. Those opening sounds of the first movement, with 3 rising notes of a scale, will come to full fruition in the grandly romantic theme of the finale. The second movement incorporates music that Sibelius first associated with an encounter between Don Juan and death, and shows true sustained lyricism. Sibelius begins the movement with a timpani roll and pizzicato strings from which a bassoon melody emerges. The movement ends with a towering brassy theme following a mist-like motif in the divided strings. The scherzo is brief, hurried, and expectant, followed by a slow section that features a sorrowful lyrical oboe solo accompanied by clarinets and horns. After a trumpet blast, the scherzo is played again with a trio section as the movement transitions into the finale without a pause. From there, the fourth and final movement unfolds slowly, continuously, and with increasing power and majesty. It rises and soars in ways that the other movements just don't. Like in Beethoven's Symphony No. 5, Sibelius brings back the transitional material from between the last two movements, but now in a major triumphant key. The conclusion is intended to light up the listener's spirits by giving them confidence in the future ahead of them. Thank you for joining me to learn more about the works you'll hear on this weekend's program. We hope to see you in the concert hall.